8th, 2022. This is the Arlington County, Virginia Board of Equalization hearing. There's two cases on the agenda. We're going to start with the first one, which is RPC 15040-054 at 3801 14th Street North. Mr. Donald Myers is here as the owner of the property. And Mr. Myers, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to sort of stop right now and tell you that I had an understanding with Rosa Torres that there would be a single hearing for the two properties, one of which is my own and the other for which I'm acting as agent. And I would be given 16 minutes in lieu of the fact that there won't be two separate hearings.
Okay, you can proceed, sir.
Okay, and then the other thing I have to say, and I'd like the clock not to start as yet, I need to make a statement by virtue of the fact that the Arlington County Board has sued me, and I in turn have sued the county to make clear sort of that nothing that I say today should be construed as an admission, an acknowledgement, or concession of any point that pertains to the litigation that is outstanding. And in that regard, it should also be understood that I continue to be of the view that the county board has engaged in an unconstitutional taking of my property and that of the Trofimenkos without just compensation, as I've asserted in my litigation. Is that understood?
We've heard your statement, yes. We're going to start the 16 minutes.
Okay, let's get the PowerPoint on this. All right, can I get an acknowledgement that you all can see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, let's move to the first slide. Okay, I'm going to make three primary points in my 16 minutes of time. The first point is that the appraisal methodology employed by the Arlington County Department of Real Estate Assessments, which I'll refer to from this point on as the REA, is not in accordance with generally accepted appraisal practices, procedures, and rules as prescribed by a nationally recognized professional appraisal organization, such as the International Association of Assessing Officers, the IAAO. As such, the resultant valuation of the appellant's respective properties is improper and incorrect. Point two is, given the facts at hand, there are no comparables within Arlington County, and I'll obviously go into that. And point three is the appellant's properties are unmarketable. As such, they have no market value. Okay, let's go to point one. What did the REA do or not do in arriving at its proposed valuations? The REA applied a one-size-fits-all approach. The REA applied a -5% outside influence, and this is in quotes, to land or improvements in line with other similar properties in the county. If you take a look at the 4/29/2022 and 4/30/2022 letters proposing the reductions in the appraised values of the appellant's respective properties, you'll see that that appears in both cases, my property and the Trofimenkos, on page 3 of those documents. Number two, the REA identified 3 locations in the county that, quote unquote, stood out as being similar in use or impact on the surrounding parcels. The Virginia Hospital Center, the East Falls Church Metro Station, and the Water Pollution Control Plant. You can see that on page 2 of the REA report under the caption Inspection and Analysis, 3rd paragraph. Curiously, none of the 3 comparable properties are in the vicinity of those 3 locations. Number 3, the county did not consider other county-owned locations within Arlington County that are zoned for industrial uses and are being used for the back of the house purposes, such as the Green Valley Shirlington site, where the art buses were located and operated out of from 2016 through mid-June 2022, when they ended up in my backyard.
Mr. Myers?
Yes.
I'm going to just interrupt 1 second. Your PowerPoint slides are not moving. You're still on the first screen as far as what I can see. I just wanted to let you know that.
Okay, thank you.
I feel like we're missing information.
Well, so far I'm actually with where I am in terms of my remarks. below. You're right, I fell one slide behind. Anyway, so I just articulated point 3. The 3 county-owned properties that do allow for industrial use are the Green Valley Shirlington site, the Shirlington Trade Center, and the Eads Light Maintenance Facility Water Treatment Plant in Crystal City. These properties are discussed at greater length at point 2. Point 4, the REA selected 3 comparable properties located at, well, you can see that on the screen. And you can also see the distances of those 3 properties to the Quincy site, which my property and the Trofimenko's property directly abuts, and we're less than 100 feet from the art buses. I would suggest to you basically that none of those properties can be considered to be comparables. The other thing I'd like to highlight, and this brings back in play again the litigation that I referred to at the outset. The Board of Equalization should be aware of the inconsistency between the location of the REA's 3 comparables and the position being taken in the county board's lawsuit against me, the Ballston Virginia Square Civic Association, and one other neighbor. In that lawsuit, the county board and its lawyers are seeking a declaratory judgment that Miss Marie Shum-Brady, the 3rd defendant, whose residence is closer to the Quincy site than the closest of the 3 comparables served up by the REA, does not have standing because her property is too far away from the Quincy site for her to be able to allege any particularized harm from the noxious use being made of the Quincy site. So clearly, the REA's 3 comparables would all be disregarded by the county board and the county legal staff if the county itself were in the decision-making role that the BOE is in today. So what I basically just tried to explain why it is that the REA's method of assessment, appraisal rather, is totally flawed and not consistent with the IAAO standards. So what should the REA have done? Well, first of all, I would tell you that in order to answer that question for myself, I reviewed essentially everything on the IAAO website over several days, including the IAAO technical standard on the valuation of properties affected by environmental contamination, which I believe Ms. Torres got to all of you yesterday. I then had a lengthy discussion with Ms. Sharon Hiss, a representative of the IAAO. She walked me through the steps an appraiser should perform when confronted with a situation like this one. And I made contact with 7 real estate appraisers in and around Arlington County explaining the relevant facts, asking each of them what procedures he or she would need to follow to meet the IAAO standards. What did I learn? According to the appraisers I spoke with, a proper appraisal of the appellant's properties would require taking the following steps. Identifying other areas, if any, within Arlington County that are made use of for light industrial purposes, have similar noxious externalities in terms of the noise, the environmentally harmful emissions affecting air quality, the exacerbating of existing traffic conditions, have comparable mitigation measures, which in this case are effectively none, and are surrounded by residential properties as close in proximity as the appellant's properties are to the sources of the noxious effects, in this case, again, within less than 100 feet. Step 2, if such areas can be identified within Arlington County, it cannot be identified within Arlington County, expand the search area to other counties in Virginia, and if necessary, outside the state of Virginia. Step 3, once comparable areas have been identified, study historical sales transaction data to determine the before and after market valuations of the surrounding residential properties, as well as transactions in which the owners of surrounding residential properties were not able to sell their properties. And finally, step 4, with the information gathered, engage in a regression analysis to calculate the percentage impairment in value resulting from the noxious uses of the contiguous property, in this case, the Quincy site. The appraisers I spoke to indicated that this process would take substantially more time than the REA typically dedicates to its appraisal process. I then spoke to Ms. Hiss about what it is that I learned from those appraisals, and she confirmed that the IAAO would in fact say that that process that was described to me would be proper given the facts at hand. So now I move on to point 2. which is that there are very few properties in Arlington County that are owned by the county and zoned for industrial use. They are, as I previously mentioned, the Green Valley Shirlington Art Bus Site, the Shirlington Trade Center site, and the Eads Light Maintenance Facility. I don't know whether you all are familiar with those sites, but I've included pictures to sort of highlight the points that I'm trying to make. The Green Valley Shirlington site is removed from residential areas, located near industrial and commercial land uses, compatible with loud noise, adjacent to compatible uses, serves as a buffer from I-395, and concentrates noxious uses. None of the residential properties being used as residential properties surrounding that site are within 0.2 of a mile of the location where the art buses were parked from 2016 to June 2022. The Shirlington Trade Center which my wife and I drove down to just this past weekend, is basically, there are no residential properties that directly abut the trade center other than what is referred to as the Wingate Village condominium complex, which is quite different in terms of, I call it, the price point and the nature of the housing. Anyway, you can see, by the way, on this slide, that the Wingate Village condominiums are on the top left portion of the screen. And having driven through the trade center, that's not where the buses are located, by the way. So again, the distance is not comparable. And then the third location is the Eads Light Maintenance Facility. Again, my wife and I drove there just this past weekend. The nearest residential properties are a good 0.2 of a mile away, and at a significantly higher elevation than where the noxious uses are located. So now I'm going to offer up what I think should have been one of the comparables, but wasn't on the part of the county, the REA. There's a property located at 1660 North George Mason Drive. It's a townhouse, 4,900 square feet. It was put on the market on May 24, 2022 at $1,600,000, $326 per square foot. In the last month, the price has been dropped 4 times and is now at $1,555,000, $317 a square foot. In the meantime, a 4,427 square foot townhouse property located at 6011A 4th Street North was put on the market on May 19th. So 5 days before the first property, with a listing price of $1,008,000. It is now under contract. Why is the former property priced so significantly below market? And if you use the square foot price of the second property and multiply that by the square footage of the first property, that property should have been on the market at $2 million. Instead, it's at $1,550,000 and not getting any interest whatsoever. I tried to reach the listing agent, Roy Cohn, last week. He has not returned my call, but I feel relatively certain that he would attribute the under market asking price and price reductions to 2 factors. 1, there is an art bus stop immediately in front of the property, and 2, the Virginia Hospital Center is directly across the street. The Virginia Hospital Center, by the way, is one of the 3 properties that the REA identified as basically similar in use, but interestingly, none of its comparables are anywhere in the vicinity of any of those 3 parcels. So now let's move on to point 3. The reality of the situation, or with all the analysis kind of put on the side for the moment, is that the Profimenko's property and my property are now effectively unmarketable. How do I know this? Well, I've talked to 4 real estate agents over the past couple of months to solicit their views on how much of a haircut the appellants and the appellants would have to take to sell our respective properties. All were reluctant to serve up a number. However, 2 of the real estate agents indicated that to sell our properties, the asking price would need to be approximately $500,000 to $600,000 below the property's fair market value, absent the Quincy site, so that it would appear to prospective buyers that the properties are being given away. They cautioned that such a pricing strategy could result in raising alarms with prospective buyers, such that no offers would be forthcoming. More significantly, I think, though, is that all of the 4 real estate agents expressed reluctance to serve as the listing agent of either or both of the properties, citing 4 primary reasons. 1, the risk to their reputations. 2, the risk of being sued, even with full disclosure, as I would insist upon. 3, a lack of confidence that the county's current use of the Quincy site would be quote unquote temporary, to use the county's word, highlighting that 3 years is not temporary. In any event, I guess I'd highlight also that the county's contract with the Arlington Public Schools for parking of the White Fleet vans on the Quincy site is also characterized as temporary, but the contract, it provides a base term of 2 years with up to 6-year automatic 1-year renewals. So in other words, 8 years, which is the county is characterizing as temporary. And finally, the county's intended use of the Quincy site, as you may or may not know, is to serve as swing space, which creates a cloud of uncertainty, to use my term, regarding other potential noxious uses of the Quincy site in the future. The county board members themselves have acknowledged the burden that they're imposing upon the surrounding residential properties. Consider the remarks of board member Karatonis. And again, I provided you with a transcript of the board discussion at the May 14th meeting so that you can verify these words. It says, "We know that we are asking the neighborhood next to the Quincy property for a significant sacrifice for these 2 years." I don't know where you got the 2 years, it's 3. "They will have to deal with the noise and the consequences of, being the host of these 29 art buses. I understand that DES, the Department of Environmental Services, Arlington County, has done everything they can to mitigate their impacts. In fact, the county has done essentially nothing. And we are also putting our money where our mouth is." I don't know what money he's referring to. "When we are committing, very soon we'll be committing to a process that will plan the use of this site for permanent use. Right now, we are asking just for a temporary use." The county board is making a big deal of the temporary use, although the zoning ordinance doesn't make that relevant in any way. In any event, the point that I'm trying to make is the county staff has done little or nothing to mitigate the noxious effects of the current use of the Quincy site for the parking and operation of the 29 art buses. So my conclusion is as follows. At 64, I cannot afford to write off a 1.8 million investment. And when I refer to the 1.8 million, that's the money that I've invested in this property since purchasing it back in 2002 for $750,000. Neither can the Trofimenkos. If the BOE were to determine to reduce our real estate assessments to 0 from 2022 on, it would take over 100 years, ignoring the time value of money, to offset the unconstitutional taking of our properties without just compensation. In light of the woefully flawed and incomplete appraisal process conducted by the REA and the other information cited in this presentation, I seek the BOE's reduction in my property and the Trofimenkos property to 0. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Can you take down the screen share, please?
I'm trying to.
Okay.
Am I still with you?
Yes, you are. But the screen share is still up.
Could Rosa take it down?
Rosa, can you disable my screen share?
Hold on for 1 minute, please. I'm trying.
Okay.
Mr. Myers, can you just click the X at the top right hand corner?
Yeah. Did that do it?
No.
browser.
It's not letting me share it.
How about now?
No, it's still there. There we go.
Okay. I hope you can understand. I've never used Teams before, so this is
No problem. Okay. I believe we have Mr. King. There we go. All right, Mr. King for the county, you can start, and you two will have 16 minutes.
Okay, great, Mary. Good morning, board. So I'll just be covering both properties here. We have 3801 14th Street North, two-story single-family home, 4 bedrooms, 4.5 bathrooms, a basement garage. And then 3811 14th Street North, a two-story single-family home, 4 bedrooms, 4.5 bathrooms, and a detached garage. 3801 was built in 2001, has an effective age of 2001 and a quality of excellent. 3811 was built in 2000 with an effective age of 2000 and a quality of excellent. Both these properties' neighborhood increased 3.5% for 2022 due to the sales analysis. Both of these properties were not inspected. For 3801, the quality and effective age were assumed to be in line with the neighborhood due to the construction age. For 3811, this property was also not inspected, but the quality and effective age appear in line with the neighborhood based on the photos from the 2018 listing. We did look at a few sites in the county to determine if an outside adjustment was necessary for being adjacent to this county-owned property. As Mr. Meyer brought up, there were no homes abutting the Green Valley site or trades. They would have been great to have for our data analysis, but there's no residential properties or single-family residential properties there for us to use. So the big ones that we looked at were Virginia Hospital Center, East Falls Church Metro Station, and the Water Pollution Control Plant, as well as various commercial sites across the county. So after looking at all that, we look at the assessment to sales ratios for those properties, see if any adjustments could be made, looking at what's already taken into account and what could be taken into account. And they all seem to indicate roughly a negative 5% adjustment on the land and improvements. And we feel that the county-owned property is now similar in effect on some of those other properties on the surrounding residential properties. So this was applied to the subject property of 3801 and also 3811. We also put a negative 10% pipe stem adjustment on the land on both of those properties. They both are pipe stems. The property, the 3801, did not seem to have been inspected or updated since construction. So I consulted the plat on file for that property, which resulted in some square footage adjustments. For 3811, same thing. It didn't look like it had been inspected since it was built. So I again consulted the plat on file and the 2018 listing. Both of those resulted in some square footage adjustments for the properties. Now the comp sheet for the surrounding area, we feel is pretty strong, especially accounting for the size and age of the subject property. There were no comparable properties submitted by the appellant, except for the Trofamenco's listing, which didn't sell. Looking to the future, if there are comparable sales adjacent to the site that come through, we'll always look at those and take those into account in our valuation. But there's just nothing right now for us to look at. So that's why we expanded it to take a look at some of these other high traffic areas and industrial sites in the county. So combined all together, the changes made by the department brought the assessment value for 3801 from $1,615,500 to a revised assessment of $453,000. And then for 3811, the property value was revised from $1,699,100 to a revised value of $1,508,900. And we feel those are supported by the sales in the area. Thank you.
That's it?
I mean, you can always ask questions, but we're really just going off the sales data and what we could find and work from for sales comparison.
Okay. All right. Questions from the county? I'm sorry, questions from board members. Mr. Hoffman.
I got one just to the appellant. I think at the end of your presentation, you mentioned that this is an investment property or you made an investment in this property. Could you just expand? I mean, is this an income producing investment? Is there any income associated with it, or is it just a speculative, I'm going to buy a house and then I'm going to sell it years later at a different price?
Well, I'm going to elaborate. I think what I said was misunderstood. I purchased the property for roughly $750,000 in 2002. If you know the history of this area, it used to be that there was a access road running down my property from 14th Street North into the Quincy site. All right. There were three actual separate access, two access ways, neither of which are the current one off North Quincy Street. I don't know who it was at the county that was responsible for this, but when the builder built that house, he left huge chunks of concrete and asphalt running along that access way or whatever. I had to spend $220,000 having the entire property excavated to get rid of all that crap out of the ground. So you take the $750,000, now I'm close to $1 million. I could go on, but the point is that I've invested close to $1.8 million to get the property in its current condition. I am not renting the property. It's being made use of as a primary residence. That was the point that I was trying to make. I've got $1,800,000 invested in this property.
Yeah, I got it. I heard the term investment. I was thinking something different.
Okay, I have a question for the appellant. I was confused in your opening statement that there's a lawsuit currently against the county for this.
No, let me clarify again. I hope everybody appreciates sort of, I'll call it the audacity of what it is that the county board has done to me and the others.
Yes, I understand, sir. Just answer the question.
Yeah, so I have in fact sued the county board. Yes.
And what is the nature of the lawsuit?
Basically alleging that the county had no right to deny my appeal to the Board of Zoning Appeals with respect to the actions taken by the county board to grant a special exception use permit to allow those art buses to be on the Quincy site.
Okay, and this is currently in litigation now?
Yes.
Right,
Which is why I inquired, Rosa could attest to this. In fact, I think Andrew King can also attest to this, that I raised the question, could this hearing be held today? And Andrew King responded basically that that was not relevant for purposes of this hearing.
All right, Mr. King, is that what you said?
I wrote to Mr. Myers that it would not be used in our case against him for the hearing. If he wanted to bring it up, his case, he could, but it wouldn't have any impact on our valuation of his property.
I agree. It should not have any impact on the valuation.
Okay, so, all right, Mr. King, you really did not even address any of the external issues that the appellant brought up. You did a great analysis of, the sales in the neighborhood and whatnot, but, this property and similar properties are certainly different than some of the other properties in this neighborhood. Do you want to expand on that a little?
Sure. I mean, so we realized that, this is an industrial site. There's going to be buses there. Like I said, we tried to compare it. We tried to find other areas that had either, high traffic areas like the hospital, or, we looked at fire stations. Also, they have, loud trucks going all the time. We addressed it through the reduction on the property. We gave a negative 5% adjustment to the land and the improvement to take that into account. And that's really what we see in line with some of the other industrial sites in the county, and the hospital, the fire stations, East Falls Church Metro, and the water pollution control plant. Again, we just don't have a lot of data to go off of. If the Trofamenco's property had sold, and it had sold for 85% of its assessment, that's something for us to go off of. But we feel that the reductions really bring the property in line with what that listing price ended up, what the final listing price was on the Trofamenco's property, especially including, some appreciation over the past few years. That listing was for 2019, so we have seen a large increase in sales values over the past few years. So we feel it's in line with the the previous listing price of the Trofamenco's property without a lot of other information to go off of.
May I interject and
No,
point out?
actually, no, when you're asked a question, you can answer, and then you'll get a time to wrap up.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. King, so the adjustment that you did do on it, which you said was 5%,
Correct.
and that is for what factor?
That's for being adjacent to the county-owned industrial site. So those are the same changes we make for properties that are near East Falls Church Metro, if they're near Virginia Hospital Center, if they're near the water pollution control plant. Some of the fire stations have those. Not all properties adjacent to the fire stations have those, but that's what we use on some of them. Many retail sites, especially, located next to, late night type properties. So 7-Eleven, CVS's, those type of things usually get a 5% reduction as well, for the various issues being located adjacent to those properties entail.
Okay. Mr. Metzgen.
I have two questions for the department. The first one you just now partially answered, namely bringing up private sector noisy uses, 7-Eleven, whatnot. I assume that also includes from time to time, as an example, because it's a better, a more closely related example to this particular case, automobile sales and or service establishments. There's certainly plenty of single family houses that abut to them. So they typically, on case by case basis, also enjoy this 5% discount. Okay, because we kept talking about public uses in the hospital center, quasi-public. I want to make sure that it's really way more than that. So
yeah, I should have been clear.
I
mean, lots of properties that are adjacent to retail have these 5% adjustments.
Yeah,
as well.
very good.
And we usually don't see it go much higher than that. I mean, we have some certain the busiest roads in the county go a little bit higher, but there's nothing we see that's that far out of line, from sales price to assessment that really takes it more than, 10% or something. We don't see that much change in sales prices.
And we on the board have certainly seen, excuse me, plenty of appellants on very busy arterials getting a 10% discount.
Sure.
Just as you said. So that's established for the record. Second question is, have these two appellants received the 5% for noise and 10% for pipe stem in prior years, or is this the first time?
This is the first time. So, like I said, not every property adjacent to an industrial site or retail gets that 5%. It's a case by case basis. There's a subjective decision that we make. So they hadn't gotten this 5% for the industrial site in previous years, but that's a decision we're making currently and going forward. The pipe stem adjustment probably should have been on there. We didn't have that in previous years, but that should have been on there just in terms of equity with other pipe stem properties in the county.
Well, on the 5%, what changed this year? The appearance of art buses?
That just the study. I mean, it's not always brought to our attention that something has changed or that a use has changed. So it's something that we take into account on a case-by-case basis and just move forward from there in terms of changes that we see affecting the property.
But those changes, they came from these appellants. They brought
Correct.
to your attention these externalities. Okay.
Right.
Great.
And then they were applied to everything that is now abutting the Quincy site. So
okay.
going
So
forward, they all have
the
that.
appellants generated this. Thanks a lot. Very good.
Okay, to follow up on that, just one thing, and then Mr. Yates, you can follow me, just to make sure the site plan's been in place since 1985, and this new usage that's being used with moving the buses here and whatnot, can you both confirm that this is a temporary use, that they're eventually going back to Shirlington?
I don't know for sure.
I believe what
Can I answer that question?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So the bottom line is the use permit that was granted provides for a term ending December 31, 2025. But in typical county fashion, it also says, subject to the county board making a decision to renew the use permit for an indefinite period of time into the future. Okay. So again, from my vantage point, the word temporary is a farce.
Okay. All right, Mr. Yates.
To the county, in what kind of cases do you give a 10% versus a 5% for that locational issue?
I'm not sure. I don't think we really have much for adjacent to any kind of site. We do have it for Route 50, and I think some sections of Lee Highway. So the busiest roads in the county do get up into 10%. But that's about it.
So 7-Eleven, firehouses, whatever else may be, are all 5%.
Correct. And some of that's just the nature of the county. I mean, I know Mr. Myers brought up looking, outside Arlington or outside Virginia. Arlington is a very specific case. You could put lots of negative type places adjacent to a property, and it would still sell for a good amount. I mean, there's only so low that a property is going to go in the county in terms of sale prices.
Okay, other questions? No? So a lot of information. Everyone's good? We're just going to discussion. Okay, all right, Mr. King, if you'd wrap up, sir.
Sure. So without very much sales data to go off of submitted by the appellant, the department feels that the changes made to the property in terms of the negative outside adjustment that we applied and also the pipe stem adjustment. We feel this brings the values of both 3801 and 3811 14th Street in line with what the Truffle-Menko's listing was back in 2019, taking into account increasing sales prices. Again, we recommend the revised assessment of $1,453,000 for 3801 and a revised assessment of $1,508,900 for 3811. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Myers, if you take a few minutes to wrap up, sir.
Yeah, first of all, I'd just like to correct two things that were said in the questioning round. First of all, the Truffle-Menko's property, as indicated in the submission that I made in advance of the hearing, was dropped in a listing price by $345,000, which represents roughly 25% of its original listing price. 25%, not 5%, not 10%, but 25%. And even still, it, after 21 months, didn't receive a single offer. And then the other thing I guess I would highlight, somebody raised the issue of, I don't know what it was, a CVS or other retail establishments or an auto dealership. I guess I'd highlight to you that at least the auto dealership is not open 24/7. These buses, the peak time in which they're leaving the Quincy site is 4 a.m. and the peak time in which they're returning is midnight. I can tell you it's now been about 2 weeks that my wife and I have basically not been able to sleep through the night. And by the way, it doesn't make any difference. We moved to the front bedroom of the house. Our back of their house is looking right out on the buses or whatever. The difference in the noise level is about 2 dBA, which if you're familiar with that metric, basically is inconsequential. The reality is we're dealing with the equivalent of a noise level of a jackhammer being operated in the middle of the night. And I guess I'd say the other thing, that if you looked at the last slide that I had, which pictured the buses taken from my property, right? Imagine you're standing there at your kitchen window, washing dishes or whatever it is that you're doing, and you're looking out at 29 art buses. Now, I guess I would say to you, who do you know at the price point that we're talking about for properties in this neighborhood who would go through, an open house or whatever, look out that window or whatever and say, oh yeah, I'm going to buy this property. I guess I would say, as I said to the fellow who runs the DES, you are out of your effing mind.
Okay, thank you, sir. It's just among the board members now. What's everybody think? This is Mr. Matzkin.
I have 3 comments for us. The first one is that I don't believe that these properties, 4 comments, are valueless. Are they worth less than if they were 2 blocks away? For sure. But they're not valueless. Second, I wanted to ask, but it wasn't fair to ask the appellant why there's a string of houses that back up to this property and not all of them joined in on this. I got a couple of theories, none of which are particularly valuable because they're only mine, but I was wondering why it's only 2 out of 5 or whatever, that nobody else is outraged. It's a question and should be in all of our minds. Third, this property was zoned primarily M1 for many, many, many years and always had the potential, certainly long before the two appellants bought their respective properties. It could have gone into some noxious use long ago. It was always, and I know this property very, very, very well. And it generally wasn't much until the county started putting buses there. But there was always that potential, and to me, that's a due diligence issue on the appellants. Like we've seen many times, appellants came, as an example, who bought across from the hospital. The hospital was there first, the ambulances were there first. So that tempers my sympathy. And lastly, I can't count. I guess the county has made it okay to park buses. I couldn't find anything in the zoning ordinance that makes it okay, but I guess it is by this quote temporary action on the county, which may or may not become permanent. I'm surprised the county hasn't put up a sound barrier. I mean, we certainly see that next to all kinds of traffic-related noise producing elements. It just between us, that surprises me that wouldn't be a solution. That's what I have. Thank you.
That is just to speak to the sound barrier. That is one thing when I read in the county board minutes that they did discuss. In fact, they were checking in to see whether the zoning ordinance would allow a 7-foot or a 6-foot or 7-foot high barrier for that. So I don't know where that is, but I know that that's something that they're looking at. But okay, other comments? Mr. Penaranda? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mary. Well, the questions I was going to ask were actually answered when the question and answer period was done, and mainly it was, for the location adjustment. We've seen other cases where this, my original concern was that these two lots are like, sometimes they're considered flag lots. That's, in some cases there are adjustments based on what's behind, if there's a stream or there's, something that is really detriment to the property. But, this is a special case that I was trying to see whether the adjustment was proper. And, we've done this before as a board, as the board has done, we made this type of adjustments. And I think the adjustments that the county made are, in my opinion, they're fair and they're, in line to what we've seen before. As it was mentioned, some of the adjacent properties to some of these cases that we had are industrial use, retail, dealerships or repair shops. But and I drove by the whole block. I went to the lot behind. Yeah, the properties are really close to the lot. But, like Ken said, these are not properties that are worth zero. So based on this adjustments, to me, I think the proposed assessment is in line. I'm okay with that.
Okay. Mr. Yates?
I honestly, I do think the appellants made some good arguments, and I clearly agree, not to a dollar. There's value to this property. And given some of the history, the values have been greatly impacted. A 5% adjustment because of its location there, I don't think sufficient. And the argument, the one that's tried to sell and is down 25% with no offers, that's compelling. Given the properties throughout Arlington and the opportunities to pay this kind of price for a house, you can get a house. And if you've got 5-10 choices, is this the one you're going to say, oh, okay? And I don't think so. I'm not sure how to come to it without pulling a number out of the air as far as a percentage, but I don't feel 5% is near enough. This, and it will go back up if that use changes in the future. But while it's there, this house is not as habitable as mine is.
Yeah, I like I said, this is a lot of information. I've gone back and forth on this. And I would tend to agree with you, Mr. Yates. I think the 5%, we're comparing it against, properties that were next to a hospital. Yes, the hospital was there. They knew it when they purchased it. Even though when these houses were built, some of these were built and bought, the site plan was in place, the property has been there, but now the use of it does impact it. And since we do assess on an annual basis, I don't know, maybe, I think some of the comments from the county board members were, let's put our money where our mouth is, let's do something. This is something very significant, very small. It would get renewed every year. And it would also kind of be a check and balance for the fact that, from what I understand, this is a temporary measure. But as the appellant brought up, the county could come back and say, okay, well, we're going to renew it permanently. I mean, that's just a vote from the county board to do that. So I don't know. I could go. Mr. Hoffman, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with everything Ken said earlier. And then what you're saying right now, Mark and Mary, kind of going through, 5%. In my mind, I think maybe another 5% would be fair. But and the rationale for that is, one of the issues this guy's dealing with is not necessarily that he's next to an adverse use, but that he's next to an adverse use in which the county is the culprit, right? So it's different than, if you're next to a restaurant and they're violating their hour restrictions, or their dumpsters are a mess, and you call up the county and the county fixes it, right? They won't renew the special use permit that restaurant has. He's dealing with all these, I'm looking at these pictures, decibel readings, you got dumpsters everywhere, trash everywhere. Who you gonna call, right? So I think that's probably going to be a huge point in this separate lawsuit, is the county even adhering to their own zoning action on this property? There's all kinds of restrictions that were part of this special use permit. Are they complying with them? But right now it seems like they're not. And with that uncertainty hanging over the property, I would expect it to probably take a bigger hit if it was put on the market. So I think I like Andrew King's assessment. I think as far as comps and everything are good. I'd support a little bit more on the negative adjustment than the original 5%.
Is 25% the wrong number? Because if you owned this house,
yeah,
what would you think? And the county, they've not put up fencing, additional fencing or something along the highway barriers or type thing, or.
Yeah, Mark, the 25%, the only issue I have with the neighbors sale process is it was like 2018, 2019. So that was kind of a tricky period to go back and use it as a guideline.
Different housing market.
Yeah. And, I suspect that.
But it had no offers at that.
Yeah. 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 It's kind of a stranger property if you look at it. You got the garage in the front, a bunch of kind of overgrowth around it. So I don't know at the time what was the curb appeal. Was it marketed as is, as a fixer upper? Was it I don't have all those details, so I have a hard time just using that as like a comp. But that's why I'm kind of leaning towards just putting an additional 5% on it, and we'll probably see this case in a year. And hopefully the county can do a better job of complying with the regulations that they put on themselves here.
Mr. Matzkin.
I would just echo one thing, and that is the extra 5%. I would support that fully, but not because we pull a rabbit out of a hat or a number out of a ledger, but rather that's the maximum noise interference discount that the county permits. And because the buses are during the day, it's pretty quiet over there. They do some repairs, which is within code, in what used to be the bowling alley, but I don't think that disturbs anybody. The appellants certainly haven't brought it up. It's this midnight 4 a.m. stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what the hospital does. And people on George Mason, which also live on a very busy street, besides hospitals and ambulances, they get 10% discount. So that's why I would support
100%.
what Mark described as 5% more.
And
Mr. Dixon?
I'm sorry, I'm not advocating this to the appellant, and it's an additional cost, but we did a house that we put in soundproofing windows. They weighed a ton to get installed, but it made a phenomenal difference. You did not hear anything in the house. You opened the door and it was all right there. Now that's a cost on the appellant, and I'm not saying he needs to do that, but that is one remedy to help deal with some of this. And maybe he goes at the county in some other way concerning that, but that's not our say, but there are remedies.
Okay, I'm just to throw out for a conversation on that. If you're looking at an additional 5%, I don't know which member made the comment that other people didn't join in on this, but we do know that there's other properties impacted. I didn't think to ask the county if the other properties got the 5% for the same exterior influence. I have to assume that they did. So I don't know whether we're talking about if we do this, are we, from a standpoint of equalization, are we looking at doing this for the other properties adjacent to it? Mr. Panorama.
I'm not sure about that question, Mary, but I wanted to comment also on the prices of the properties. This is not the only one that we've seen. A lot of times properties are listed just at a very high price. The seller is the one that decides what price it's going to be listed at. And, they stay on the market for a while. And even if they reduce it to a market value that it should sell, a lot of times it's not going to sell because it becomes an old listing and people just, either wonder why it didn't sell.
Right.
The seller also, the appellant also mentioned another property at 1660 George Mason Drive, which, in my opinion, there are other circumstances why it wouldn't sell. This property, for example, the listing company is offering a very low commission to a selling company.
Mm-hmm.
So that discourages agents from showing it. And so, just the market price that they listed at does not really reflect why a property is not selling, or, it's, to me, it's not really the main issue why this property should be reduced. But I'll be okay with another 5% reduction if the board is willing to do something.
Well said, Mr. Realtor. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and go ahead, Mr. Hoffman.
Just a clarification, that the other reductions are on the land, or is that on the total price?
The reduction, I believe, was on the land.
Will be on the land.
So
Yeah.
we'll be taking another 5% off the land component.
Right.
And nothing more for livability of the house.
Correct.
Yeah, it's the location that we're accounting for, not the house is terrific. The houses, it's where they are.
It's not. The land's going to be there, and the land's going to keep moving at the same value going forward, with or without this facility behind them. It's the livability of that house that I think becomes the factor. And that's what someone's buying. They're not buying the land. They're buying it to live in it. If they put this on the market to sell, that's the price someone's going to look at. The land will be the land. I agree. It's the impact on the residential aspect of this property. Yeah, I'm
Right. Well, I would disagree with that. I think it's the influence on the land. The house is the house. If you pick the house up and put the house somewhere else.
I agree. That's true.
So Mr. Hoffman,
I got numbers if anybody wants to hear.
did you get 1416?
On the first, yeah, on 054, and then the other one was 1473, 755.
I didn't do the second one.
Okay.
Okay. All right,
I'm sorry, can you say those numbers again on the land?
The land for case 15040-054, or that RPC, the land would be 688,845, and the total would be 1,416,745.
Okay.
Going off of the county's revised numbers.
On 1504, 3801 14th Street, I got 682,480 on the land. Because the original assessment was 853,100. And if we take 20% off would be, the 10% plus another 10%.
oh, because Greg, you took it off of the revised, so it was
I
a
did
little.
5% off the revised.
Right, but it would be 5% off the original, so it would match the other 5%.
All right, if Jose's got numbers, I'll go with those. That logic makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's off the original.
All right, so Jose, can you restate that? What the land?
Yeah, the land would be 682,480. And the building would be the same, 727,900, which make a total of 1,410,400 rounded.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not work out the numbers on the other one yet, but I will.
All right, well, would somebody like to make a motion on the first one? Okay.
I can do it. I'll make the motion to reduce to 1,410,400 and take the deduction out of the land value.
All right, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. The property is reduced to 1,410,400. On the second RPC, which is 15040,055. Jose, if you have that.
Yes. The value on the land on that would be 662,720 plus the building value would make it a total of 1,305,920.
So that's doing a full 20% off of the land?
Yes.
662,720
Just
plus
804, 800.
yeah, I got a different number.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got 1,467,520.
right, yeah.
Yeah, I was using another number.
$1,467,520. Okay, so 500. All right, Mr. Hoffman, do you want to
Yeah, I'll
keep it consistent?
Sure. Yeah, motion to reduce total assessment to 1,467,500 even by the reduction in the land.
Okay, and I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. It's unanimous. The second property at 3811 14th Street is reduced to 1,467,500. Thank you, Mr. Myers. And thank you, Mr. King. That completes the agenda for today. Does anybody have any business? No? Okay, there are no cases for tomorrow, the 29th, no cases for July 5th, and no cases for July 6th. So we will re-adjourn on Tuesday, the 12th. So that pretty well completes everything there. So we will stand adjourned then at 10:34 and re-adjourn Tuesday, July 12th at 9 a.m. So we're back to 9. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.